getting a record time, test 1, 2, here we go. It is now, by the clock on the wall, 12:15. We're set for noon. I apologize for the delay getting going. I'm Paul Honeman, I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee on the Assembly, and with me today are my colleagues.
Dick Trading, I thought you remembered.
Yeah.
Harriet Drummond, Assembly member. I'm not a member of this committee, but I'm very interested in the topic.
And so, it's just a formality in case you by chance don't know who we are. I do know that we have a sign-in sheet up here in the corner of the table near where Ms. Engel is sitting from the Health Department. Ms. Diane Engel is the Director of Health and Human Services for the municipality. Also, we have with us, if you wouldn't mind, just identify yourself and which department you represent.
I'm Diane Engel, I'm Director of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Chris Kaczynski with Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utilities, Public Affairs.
Richard Steckel, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utilities, Director of Treatment.
Christy Cate is our legislative aide, and she's going to be taking some notes as well. And I believe we have some folks here we'll identify as we go along. I have currently on the list here folks that would like to talk, or at least give us available for some question and answers potentially. Mr. Ward Hurlbert, are you here? Okay. Chief Medical Officer and Director, Alaska Division of Public Health. Delissa Culpepper, are you in the audience? Okay. Ms. Culpepper is the Chair of the Alaska Dental Action Coalition. Mary Williard, okay, DDS, a Dental Health Aid Therapist, Education Director with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. Troy Ritter, okay, Troy Ritter is Lieutenant Commander, Applied Sciences Manager, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, Division of Environmental Health and Engineering. Patrick Luby, very good, and Mr. Luby is Advocacy Director for AARP Alaska. Nicolette Bennett, I think you go by Nikki, right?
Yes.
Nikki Bennett is the Health Alaska State Dental Hygienist Association. Dr. Timothy Thomas, very good. Center for Disease Control Prevention Investigations Program, Jim Toll, and he is the Alaska Dental Society Chairman or President? Executive Director. Okay, I know that Jason Egri, I recognize Mr. Egri here, and I believe you've had some folks that, did you have anybody from your program or your policy to introduce that might be given to us?
No, I have Pradeep Prater right here.
Okay.
Has a presentation to make, and then we have this gentleman here who's not associated with us. And then we have
Joe Princioto.
Oh, there are very few people who associate with me.
Very good.
Then we have John Yoon right here. And Daryl Lanzon, he wants to make a presentation.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the audience not identified that would like to either comment or give statement or testimony to this committee about fluoride? And yourself?
I'm Dr. Tom Kovalevsky. I'm the dental director at the Alaska Native Medical Center.
Perfect. Anyone else?
President of the Dental Hygiene Association of Alaska.
Okay. And
Barb Linderman, I'm just a concerned citizen.
very good. We do have Miss Sarah Sofshaw-Cohn from Dentex, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium on the phone. Ms. Cohn, are you there? Sarah? Okay, very good. Also, there's a gentleman from Girdwood, I believe, Evan Cutler, who may be calling in around the 12:30 hour or a little later, and we'll have him on the phone. He wants to talk about it.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I got an email this morning from Roman Romanovsky, but I didn't have time to print his statement and bring it with me. He was not able to be here.
I have a statement.
You do, very good.
Okay, very good. All right, so with that said, we're here discussing what's in the municipal code, Title 26, 40.050, which specifically authorizes and directs the utility director to put fluoride in the water up to 1.3 parts per million or milliliter. And again, this is subject matter testimony from the department that'll be able to give us more answers to any questions we may have and explain. So, Mr. Egri, you have been before this body, the assembly anyway, many times speaking on the fluoride matter at the municipality's drinking water. So I'd ask that you might start, if you would, share us your concerns. And what we'd like to hear is some suggested solutions. So there's a concern of yours, a problem, if you will, and a suggested solution to the matter. So if you would, please, if you'd begin. Now, again, I ask you to be a little respectful. No Gettysburg Address if possible, if you can try to be succinct as
I'll keep it
possible.
short and succinct.
Very good.
All right. Basically, shall I stand up? I guess. Let me read a couple things here. Basically, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has now acknowledged the findings of many leading dental researchers that the mechanism of fluoride's main benefit is derived from surface application and not from ingestion. And also, fluoride is unethical to be put into the water supply because individuals are not asked for their informed consent. And prior to the medication, and that's standard practice for the administration of all other medications. And I would like to yield my time back to the body and hear some other people speak. I would like to be more respond, because it's not me that wants to put the fluoride in the water. It's people here and people with the state and with health organizations that want to keep it in the water.
Well, I may have missed this, and I apologize.
Yeah.
We have been putting fluoride in the Anchorage drinking water through AWU since, and Mr. Trainee is going back to 1992. Does the department have?
We believe it's late 60s is what we believe.
Mr. Trainee?
You put chlorine in the water too, don't you?
Absolutely.
How many parts per million?
We dose it about 1.1 parts per million.
So there's two chemicals going to water, fluoride and chlorine.
There's a disinfectant, the chlorine, and then there's a fluoride that's added to it.
Thank you.
So the 60s?
We believe so. We were trying to check it and get information. We couldn't get it all the way back to where we can now. We believe it's late 60s.
And Nate, when was the last time this issue came in front of the assembly?
Ms. Crum?
I think, Mr. Chair, a little background on the fluoridation program would be in order first, before we heard the rest of the testimony.
Okay,
I think it's an issue that it's difficult to trace the start of fluoridation. Keeping records on stuff like that, I think is pretty critical where it involves public health and dosages and that sort of thing.
I get that. I just, as I challenge each speaker, if they could, particularly if you're raising a challenge to a problem, if you could identify, I may have missed it, and I apologize.
Then I would like to rephrase into two questions
Yes.
here.
Well, not a question. I'm asking if you could give a suggested solution to the problem that, as you see it.
I cannot suggest any solution other than pure water.
So you're suggesting discontinuing adding fluoride to the Anchorage drinking water?
Dissolving.
Completely.
Sodium.
Chlorine. How about the chlorine we added to the water? Would that
Well,
be discontinued too?
The chlorine is added to treat the water and to basically kill the organism like
That's
Chlorella,
acceptable.
Sporium. But the fluoride is added specifically to treat the citizens. And there's basically two different items here, the chlorine and the fluoride.
But does chlorine go to the drinkers too?
Well, the chlorine goes to the drinkers too, but at least you can filter it out pretty
That's a safety
inexpensively with a activated charcoal filter. But they're two totally different items really, because one is put in as a medicine, as a drug to treat the people, and chlorine is put in to basically kill the organisms and keep the water safe enough to drink.
Ms. Drummond?
And doesn't chlorine evaporate? I mean, if you pour the water and let it sit for a while, or several days, doesn't it evaporate as opposed to the fluoride, which is a chemical, a powder that I believe is added to the water?
Is this a question to me?
Yes.
Yeah, it does have a natural, it will degrade over time and aerate.
You're talking chloride or?
Chlorine will. Our experience is it takes quite a while up here with our temperature. It tends to accelerate in warmer water, warmer weather. So our experiments has been the chlorine does not dissipate very fast at all.
And
Ms. Drummond?
is the chlorine provided as a gas or as a powder? I'm sorry, I'm.
In the water system
Not
today
chemical.
that we do, we have gone away from gas, and it is all sodium hypochlorite that we generate on site. But it's closer to call it a type of bleach almost. It's generated, it's a liquid, sodium hypochlorite.
Okay, and-
We're away
and-
from the gas.
And in respect to the fluoride, didn't the recommended dosage change sometime recently, as recommended by the powers that be?
I'll find out. Yeah, it was recently in 2011. The recommendation was to cut the dosage from 0.7 milligrams per liter to 1.3.
No,
Yeah.
from 1.3 to 1.7.
Right. There was a range that was 0.7 to 1.3 was optimal. And at 2011, I believe it was January or early in 2011, The recommended dosage was not to exceed 0.7 milligrams per liter. So they went from a range to a not to exceed.
Okay. Interesting,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
And is there reason or basis, Ms. Engel, or?
I think the EPA altered its recommendation. I'm not an expert on that, but I do know that that AWW can answer this better, but I believe, my understanding is AWW changed its practice to be in line with what EPA recommends.
That is correct. We follow.
It was the US DHS that recommended the change to 0.7, January 7th, 2011.
And the only reason stated was to avoid adverse health effects.
Okay, so hold on just one second here. I'm gonna get a baseline here so we can get control of how we're gonna testify in this matter. Mr. Agri, you've kept it very succinct. I appreciate that. It's almost as if we're in this question and answer. It's adversarial enough. It's a contentious issue. I get it. We want to get informed and educated. So I would ask that perhaps one of your other speakers, maybe perhaps, for a succinct, yes, ma'am, please.
Would that be okay?
Introduce yourself, please, and tell us.
Hi, my name is Pradeep Prater, and first I want to thank everyone for taking up the subject. It is very important. I'm a wife, I'm a mother of 2 girls, and I have a chronic medical condition which began at the age of 3 that I cannot yet prove, but I believe was caused either wholly or in large part by exposure to fluoridated water. When I was a child, my parents had no idea of the connection between fluoride and hypothyroidism, but today what fluoride does to the thyroid is very well documented, and it is readily available to anyone that wants to learn more on the subject. Fluoride is so effective at reducing thyroid production that until the 1970s, it was actually used to treat hyperthyroidism or overactive thyroids. Last year, on the subject, the U.S. Department of Health lowered the recommended level of fluoride in water by 41%, and that's nearly half of what they used to recommend, stating adverse health effects as the only reason for the lowering of that recommendation. Fluoride is known to cause not only dental fluorosis and hypothyroidism, but we know that it lowers IQ in children, it impairs fertility, it exacerbates and may actually cause kidney disease and some cancers, irritable bowel syndrome, eczema, headaches, osteoporosis, and it might cause fibromyalgia. There's a longer list than that. That's just what I decided to mention. So we have to ask ourselves how many Anchorage residents suffer from these conditions and how many of them suffer from it as a direct result, or are their conditions exacerbated as a result of the fluoride that we put in water. The Fairbanks Fluoride Task Force was made up of 2 chemists, 1 geochemist, 1 dental surgeon, 1 microbiologist, and 1 pediatrician. For 1 year, they did extensive research on the subject. And at that time, they submitted a report to the city of Fairbanks recommending that they immediately stop water fluoridation. I have copies of that report if anyone would like copies of that. But referencing page 6, item 3, and I quote, "All of the members of the task force went into this project with incomplete and in some cases incorrect information about the issue. We suspect that we are not unique in that respect," end quote. So what they're saying is that the discovered facts about fluoride were not what they had been led to believe. And we need to remember that that task force included a dentist and a pediatrician. And they said every member of the task force was wrong about the subject. What fluoride does to the human body is irrefutable. It is a dangerous toxin that is known to cause dozens of health conditions, even in very low doses. We fluoridate hoping to protect kids from cavities, but that is not worth the damage that we know we are doing, especially to non-nursing infants and to those of us who are ultra-sensitive. We need to understand that fluoride is a medication. It is not an essential nutrient. There do with fluoride. It's the same thing, as if it's not a dangerous neurotoxin. In the 1930s, fluoride was grandfathered in, and the FDA has never approved any fluoride product for ingestion because of one simple reason. It is unsafe to ingest. Right now, there's over 250,000 Anchorage residents that are literally being medicated without their consent through the manipulation of a life-essential element, our water. I'm not asking that fluoride be outlawed. Let those who want it have it, but by choice. Kodiak, Juneau, Fairbanks, and Palmer have all stopped water fluoridation. And it's time for Anchorage to also put an end to the practice. Please stop fluoridating our water. Thank you.
Quick question, myself, but I'll start with Ms. Drummond. She's raised her hand.
Thank you. This is a question for AWWU. How many residents does AWWU serve with its water of the total population of Anchorage, which is roughly 290,000?
There's our customer accounts, we have about 55,000 accounts. And based on that, we estimate we're serving about 250,000.
That sounds a little high to me. I'm aware of, and in the interest of disclosure, I live in a rather large well system in Spenard that serves about 100 properties. We think about 400 people, 400 or 500 people. That has never been fluoridated. The well has existed since the 1950s. There are a number of wells of that size throughout the system, and there are many, many homes on the hillside and other rural parts of Anchorage that have wells with no treatment whatsoever. And it's my understanding, without a demographer, Mr. Chair, in the municipal staff, it's difficult to estimate what the average number of residents per household is. As a former school board member, we had a figure of roughly 2.3 folks per household. So at 55,000, 2.3 is not even 150,000 people. So I would appreciate some more accurate numbers in terms of how many residents AWWU's water serves, as accurate as you can come to that at some point in this
According to the
conversation.
FDA's website, AWWU services 250 some odd thousand people, I think 253.
What date was that number from the
Uh,
FDA? Because I'm talking about the census that put our current population at 291,000 approximately.
Oh, okay.
The recent census.
Yes.
And my guess is that FDA's numbers do not include the recent
Yes,
census.
they may not, but that's all that I had access to,
Okay.
so that's why I used that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, at this time, we need to, I guess, stipulate to something. I think it's a good question and request, Ms. Drummond, for the utility, if it's possible, that I gather that it's rather difficult whether you get a house-to-house survey or use the census data. If they ask that question, how many people drink water out of your tap, I guess.
That's one thing that needs to be clarified. We may serve 55,000 accounts. If you took the average household of 2.3 based on that, it'd be somewhere around 125,000. But there are a number of schools, where we're serving the residents of Anchorage water in a public location, whether it's a business, school, park. So that's where
Right.
there may be a disconnect as to the number of residents of households served water in Anchorage, which would be probably closer to 2.3 than 55, versus the number of residents of Anchorage that may consume AWW water.
So you're saying like Providence Hospital,
There, a school may have 400 children in there that, some of those are not on city water.
I have an idea.
Condo building, apartment housing.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's a difficult number to pin down.
But between the data collected by our property tax division, which can tell you exactly how many single-family homes, how many apartments, how many duplexes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then by some kind of cross-tabulation of those figures, you should be able to come up with a number. And I think that's something that the health department perhaps might want to address, Mr. Chair, but I think we need to have a number at some point, because there's a significant number of people in this community that do not buy water from AWWU, my community included, which is in the heart of Spenard. And there are dozens of private wells in my neighborhood and all along Chester Creek, and I know various other creeks in this community. So we need a number, and I appreciate your number, but I believe it's high.
Mr. Train?
Thank you.
Just Elmendorf and Fort Rich both fluoridate the water, even though they're not part of your water system. They have their own fluoridation system for both bases. So when we look at how many people are getting fluoride, it's not just in the city limits of Anchorage, it's also Elmendorf and Fort Ridge.
That's why we need a number. That's why we need a number.
One person is too many.
There you go. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm just speaking for myself,
Could
not the
you-
other.
We're taping, and I don't know if you signed it. Could you just give us your name, please?
Oh, it's Kathy Kincaid.
K-I-N-C-A-I-D?
C-A-I-D, yes. And I was born in Anchorage, and I've always had fluoride in my water, and I have major health issues. I have MS, diabetes, arthritis, osteoporosis, psoriasis. That's not even all of them. I don't have an appendix, tonsils, or a gallbladder. And I am allergic to a lot of things, chlorine being one of them. I can't go into a pool with chlorine in it. I take a lot of medications, and I don't want to take even one more that hasn't been prescribed to me. I don't know how much fluoride may have affected my health to push these diseases along. I can't take any of the drugs that would stop the progression of MS because I'm allergic to all of them. My doctor never prescribed fluoride for me or chlorine. I don't want them in my water.
Are you an AWU customer, ma'am?
Oh, I sure am. I
What
have.
part of town do you live in, if you don't mind me asking?
I live in the Pierce subdivision, on 70th off of Arctic, down by Diamond.
Okay. And you've lived there for?
I've lived there for 25 years, and I've lived in Muldoon, where I was also a customer of Anchorage Water, wastewater utility.
Thank you so much. And one follow-up question, Ms. Brady. Your data that you used, is there a way to get us a copy, maybe to our legislative aid here, of the data that you used and where it was from, if you don't mind?
Yes, I
Okay. Do you know right off the top of your head, are you collecting from different sources?
did
or-
many different sources.
Okay, so you'll be able to give that to Ms. Kata, our legislative aid?
Not today, I'd have to get.
No, that's fine. If you can
Okay.
get it, we'll get your
Yes.
information, or you can, if it's signed in.
I can back up everything I said. yes.
Okay, very good. Anything, Mr. Kim? All right. I saw a couple hands go up. Ms. Bennett, I know, I'm calling you first since you had raised your hand, I recognize. Is there anyone that would be able to respond or at least give a statement on behalf of the fluoride that's in the water at this time?
Well, I'd like to first state, I'm really sorry if either one of you are going through any kind of health problems, but there have been no definitive links between fluoride and thyroid disease and all these. There's possible links that's listening, somebody who lives in the Victoria community has a risk of cancer. Well, anybody who lives in a community has a risk of cancer. There's no actual definitive causation of fluoride causing cancer or some of these other diseases. It's just a possibility. But same for the sun.
Now,
Same for the air.
Are you speaking, the Alaska State Dental Hygienists Association? Are you authorized to speak? What is the position of your association on fluoride in the water?
We are for water fluoridation. It is
At what level?
the 0.7, and the reason why they reduced it was because there are so many other outside sources of fluoride that you can't account for whatever sources of fluoride they from. Juices, sodas, even canned vegetables and fruits will have, fluoride in them if they were produced in a fluoridated community. So they lowered it because they didn't want to limit it too much, and it was to account for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
What kind of medical professional deals with thyroid diseases? Would that be an endocrinologist? Do we have any endocrinologists in the room today? Mr. Chair, I suggest at some point in time in this fluoride discussion, we ask the professional opinion of an endocrinologist related to thyroid diseases.
Noted. I saw another hand in the back of the room speak on the matter, I believe. Okay.
I'll speak when I get my hand.
Please.
All right. My name is Darrell Lanzon, Lanzon. First of all, I apologize for how I'm dressed. You see me at other meetings wearing a tie and dressed more appropriately, but this is in the middle of the day when a lot of people are working, and I'm actually gonna go back to work. This should be at night so more people can participate. You said 100 people, well, guess what? A lot of those people are working right now. More people would have been here. I know myself of at least 10 more people that would have showed up to oppose the poison in our water. This is a human rights issue. None of you people that I know of have a medical license to give me fluoride. It's my right to not have that medicine.
That's right. Can I get your name, sir? I'm sorry.
Darrell, D-A-R-Y-L, last name L-A-N-Z-O-N. Like I said, you have no right to do that. To address the hygienists, they say it's okay to put in the water, yet the American Dental Association themselves says direct application is the most effective. So there's a difference there. The fluoride that is being put in our water is sodium fluoride. It is a hazardous waste. It is a neurotoxin. It is not calcium fluoride that occurs naturally in some groundwater. There's a big difference between a neurotoxin and something that is naturally occurring. On top of that, there is a difference between pharmaceutical grade of anything and industrial waste. These are major differences, and I encourage anybody to look this up. You know, I've spoke about this before, and I also want to apologize that I'm not as prepared as I wanted to be when we had spoke, and I talked to you about the numbers of people that I got to sign the petition that I had, because I've been involved in a legal matter that's taken up quite a bit of my time. In 2010, the American Dental Association themselves recommended this. They recommended that if you use Similac formula for babies, that you don't use fluoridated water. There's a reason for it, because non-breastfeeding children, babies, are most affected by the poison that they put in our water. It affects the central nervous system, it calcifies the pineal gland in the brain. It is not good. I told you I had a list of 50 reasons. I brought that with me to turn in. I also brought in the list of about 100 people whose names I gathered in about 90 minutes in front of City Hall. I told you that I could get a lot more and I had time, and I know I can. This is a matter for the public to decide. This isn't a matter for a group of people to decide that they have the right to medicate. That's what the FDA calls it. This is a medication. I don't have a prescription for fluoride. I don't think anybody in this room has a prescription for fluoride. I don't want a prescription for fluoride, and this comes down to bottom line, human rights, individual rights, constitutional rights. You don't have the right to medicate me without my permission, and that's exactly what you're doing. I have a bottle of water right here that comes from your taps that I have to put boron in to take the poison out in order to drink it, because I can't afford to buy bottled water all the time. But I can take it out. I know enough how to get that poison out of my water. I know enough how to get it out of my body, and I continue to do it. You see it's a little cloudy. That's because I have to put lemon in my water, which I don't mind, but in order to get that little taste that tastes like baking soda out of the water, that's what you have to do. I recommend you all do it, because you are being poisoned against your will. I can answer any questions you have, you want to throw at me. I appreciate it if someone would have to throw a tough one at me. But actually, back to your numbers, that Ms. Drummond brought up the numbers. It doesn't matter if it's 5,000 people, 1 million people, it's still against their constitutional rights to be medicated. Bottom line. If you want to get fluoride, go buy some Crest toothpaste with fluoride and rub it all over your teeth. I'm 42 years old. I've never had a cavity in my life. Guess what? I don't fluoride. It's negligible. It doesn't have any effect one way or the other. In countries in Europe where they have added fluoride to the water and then taken it out, there's been no difference. Our native population, as an example, has been massively fluoridated. And I will tell you, and I don't mean this as any slight against them, there are many of them that have terrible teeth. If fluoride was so good for them, why aren't their teeth good? If fluoride was so bad for me, so good for me to have, why don't I have a single cavity? Look, none. I'm not lying. 0. I don't have them. I brush my teeth with peroxide and baking soda. I do it myself. I don't even buy toothpaste. I mix it myself when I brush it. I have nice, clean, white teeth. Nothing to do with fluoride.
Ms. Drummond had a question or comment.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you for coming, Mr. Lanzen.
Thank you.
This is a committee meeting. We're just beginning to investigate this whole fluoride issue, and we want to do some fact-finding before we bring it to the level of a public hearing. I agree with you. It's hard for people to make it during the day when they're working, but that's the problem with all these professionals in the room. They're working, and others are not. It may very well get to the level at which it will be heard at a regular assembly meeting, which, as you know, starts at 5 p.m. at night.
And you said you wanted me to bring the
Yes.
list that I got of people that signed.
Yes, if you could give that to Ms. Kate, I'd appreciate, so she can have the, we're taking all the documentation we could.
Anybody else want to sign against poisoning your water? Also, I thought about something else that people should look into is apoptosis. I don't know if anybody's familiar with what that is, but apoptosis is related to fluoride, and one of the things that you'll notice, as most of you are at least my age or older, when we were in high school, girls were not developed like they are now. There's a big difference, and it should be noticeable to anybody in this room that you can see an 11-year-old girl that is, excuse my language, stacked. And that is related to apoptosis, and I encourage you all, Google it. Wikipedia will tell you enough about it, as terrible as a source as that is.
Can you tell us how to spell that, please?
A-P-O-P, I've written down T-O-S-I-S.
Okay, thank you.
I believe.
Sir, the other thing is, I know you had the documentation. I asked the same question I asked Ms. Pradeep. Are there sources that you are referring to get the information that you have?
There's lots of sources.
And are you able to
I'm an
provide that?
avid reader.
Are you able to provide that to?
I can provide you all kinds of links.
We'd appreciate it
All
if you
kinds
could
of
get
stuff.
that
I was
forward.
actually working on, I was telling, like, after we had the meeting at the last assembly,
Sure.
my intention was to send you all an email so I could give you access to the stuff that I have, and if you choose, like I spoke to Mr. Trombley at that meeting about.
Sure.
And I have started an email, but I just haven't had time, because I've been writing 25 pages of testimony.
Okay.
You know, so I really haven't been able to get to that. It's taken up all my free time, but I had every intention of sending all of you, the access at least to the same information that I have.
Right. So if you could get to Ms. Skata, an email where you can
I'll
send.
tell you, like, this weekend is the reconvening of the Republican convention that I am involved in some terrible ways. And after that, I will have a lot more time to put towards this.
If you could just provide your sources and
Yeah.
information. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, and there were a couple of sources here that were identified. Is there anyone else that is in the audience that is here to give testimony on fluoride for or against? Sir? If you could identify yourself and,
I'm Dr. Jess Ellis.
I'm sorry?
Jess Ellis.
Okay. And is it Jess?
Yes.
Ellis? Ellis?
Yes.
And you say you're a doctor?
I'm an endodontist.
Endodontist. Okay, if you would give testimony, do you have that microphone, just in case? Can everybody hear Dr. Ellis? Sorry about that, we don't have a stick mic, so just anywhere close.
Okay. I'm a sort of a practical type of guy. You might notice I'm wearing Carhartts as opposed to a suit and tie and whatnot. I grew up on a farm. Dentistry was the last thing I expected to find myself in. But much to my surprise, I did. I didn't expect to find myself in Alaska, but I'm here. I've been an itinerant endodontist the last 23 years in Alaska. I've practiced in Fairbanks and Anchorage and Juneau and Soldotna and Homer and Wrangell. And so I've been around. I've seen a lot of teeth. It's probably tooth decay that is my main source of cause of revenance, stuff like that. I see that in certain generations and different populations, there's a lot more tooth decay than others and stuff like that. And so I look at fluoride as having been a great benefit to a lot of people as far as the reduction of tooth decay. opinion is it has been a benefit. I see people from certain regions of the country who have cavities, fillings, you know, from one side of their mouth to the other, and then I see other populations who don't have a single cavity. My mother never had a cavity, and her sister never had a cavity, and they grew up in West Texas, where there's a lot of natural fluoride in the water. So this kind of brings up a question that I have for myself when I listen to some of the comments about the poison in the water, is I would suggest that this committee look into the question is there a better kind of fluoride? You know, if you don't like industrial waste as it's referred to, you know, is there, you know, a better fluoride? Is there, you know, some way to fluoridate water that has a less toxic, if you want to use that expression, fluoride? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's one that's worthy of investigation. My one aunt that I mentioned who never had a cavity also had dentures. She lost all of her teeth. None of them had a cavity in it. She lost them from periodontal disease. And so, you know, it's a complex issue and stuff like that. There's some people who would suggest that you know, you should take all the toxins out of the water system and whatnot. If you took all the toxins out of the water system, you would have no water system, because water itself is toxic in the wrong concentrations. I can probably explain that when I tell you that my brother, who's a physician, treated a case in Hawaii when he was there doing his residency, and a child was deathly ill, and it turned out that the caregivers were just massively giving water to this child where it threw her electrolytes out of balance, and they about lost the child before they figured out what the problem was. So the water itself can be toxic. Everything that's good can also be bad in the wrong quantities and stuff like that. So another question I would suggest that you look into is, you know, if there is to be fluoridation, is there a better level? That wouldn't cause some of the potential problems if you have too much fluoride.
And you say you don't have an answer to that either, Tom?
I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's a relevant question. So, is there a better type of fluoride, and is there a better concentration?
Mr. Chair, question.
Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Dr. Ellis, for coming. You said there was a lot of natural fluoride in the water in West Texas.
Yes.
What is the chemical composition of that natural fluoride? It was mentioned, somebody mentioned it previously.
Yeah. I think it's calcium fluoride.
Calcium fluoride occurs naturally. Sodium fluoride is what they're using in the industrial waste. It's actually a byproduct from industrial processes. And like you said before, there's a difference. Well, there's a difference between something that's pharmaceutical grade, like you're talking about, which I still oppose, I'll say, versus something that is a result of industrial processing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We may also want to look at calcium fluoride is CaF2, and the fluorosilicic silicate is Na2F6Si.
Is that the sodium fluoride?
Anything else you need to add, Doc?
Well, I would just suggest that if there's a reason for putting, you know, fluoride in the water, which I assume from most of the discussion it is with the remaining dental trays and stuff like that, I think that's valid from my experience. If you choose to take the fluoride out of the water, you know, that only helps me economically because I'm going to be doing more root canals and stuff like that in my experience. So I think it's a tool. If you potential to have filters, there's potential to have bottled water and stuff like that. So there's, for those who have, health problems and stuff like that, there are alternatives. If you decide to take it out of the water, then you have the question of, what does that do? There's long-term effects of that as far as dental caries and effects on health for that. And some of those are very long-term processes. So, anyway, those are the main points I would have.
Thank you, sir.
Very brief question for the doctor, if I may.
Real brief question.
Yeah, my name is Joseph Princiota, P-R-I-N-C-I-O-T-T-A. For the record, I'm representing no one but myself. Doctor, are you qualified to write prescriptions?
Yes.
You have a prescription pad?
Not on me, but
I mean, you, in your office, and you sign prescriptions for people?
if it's dentally related,
Do you issue a prescription for a patient you have never examined?
try not to.
You have done it in the past? You've actually
Try not
issued-
to.
Is your answer that you've actually issued a
Mr.
prescription for a
Princiota,
patient?
I
that
gave
you've
you a
never
little
examined?
latitude, you ask a question, you're gonna continue to pepper the question. Mr. Princiota, I think we get your point.
Do we have an answer from the doctor?
He said he tries not to give prescriptions, I'm gonna cut that part off. Do you have anything else, Mr. Princiota?
I
Of me,
wanted to
of the-
clarify
of this
the
committee.
indication. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
I do write prescriptions. I have written a prescription in the past for a patient I'd never seen, but took their word as to they had no allergies, and they defined what their problem was. It seemed routine enough that I would chance to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have, Mr. Princiota, you were in line to give either a question or a comment on fluoride? Was-
I had signed up for that, yes.
I have a gentleman from Girdwood on the phone that'd like to testify. Could we yield to him real quick and then?
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Cutler, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure can. Can you go ahead and just spell your name, because we're putting it on record, and this will be tape recorded.
Okay, my name is Evan Cutler, E-V-A-N-D-U-T-L-E-R.
Okay?
And I live in Girdwood.
Okay, if you can give us your information, please. We're trying to be succinct, but I understand you've been waiting patiently.
Okay, I was told I have about 2 minutes, so
Yeah.
I'll keep it to 2 minutes. I'm Evan Cutler. I graduated from Colorado State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Health, and I was also in charge of the MSDS compliance for the Colorado State University in Environmental Health Services during that time. And if you look at the material safety data sheet for sodium fluoride, you'll find that it is listed as mutagenic for mammalian somatic cells, mutagenic for bacteria, and their use of substance may be toxic to kidneys, lungs, the nervous system, heart, gastrointestinal tract, cardiovascular system, so on. Repeated or prolonged exposure can produce target organ damage. I am aware that in environmental health, we were taught that in sanitation classes that it was added starting around the 1930s, I guess, for the most part, as preventatives. And yet the studies, a lot of longitudinal studies that have occurred in the past 30, 40 years are finding that there is substantially no difference in the dental caries made between those who have sodium fluoride added to their water and those who don't. In those longitudinal studies between the European and the United States, most of our water is fluoridated and most of theirs does not. Myself, I am especially interested in maintaining my intelligence, and sodium fluoride is known to diminish intelligence. There are a number of studies demonstrating that. I do not want to be consuming it, and I would like it not to be added to the water that I drink. I cannot buy a filter that will filter it out. I have to buy a multi-$100 reverse osmosis system with very expensive changeovers to be able to get the fluoride out of the water. It simply doesn't have to be there. The arguments for having the fluoride in the water are outdated. Current research and knowledge shows that it's toxic, and we don't need it added to the water. I understand that the past education of our water treatment officials has told us that it's the right thing to add, but that is now mistaken and proven mistaken knowledge. And I would like if Anchorage municipality would follow the example of Fairbanks and Juneau and Europe, and an increasing number of communities stop adding poison to our water so that I don't have to drink it and consume it.
Okay?
I brushed my teeth already.
Okay?
That's my testimony. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Mr. Trainee? Mr. Drummond?
No, I don't have any questions.
Well,
Thank you.
Evan, I really appreciate, Mr. Cutler, I appreciate you calling and having your interest in this. And this is a fact-finding and information gathering committee meeting, and so
you're breaking up just a little bit.
Sorry, this is a fact-finding and educational information committee meeting for the Public Safety Committee of the Assembly, and we recognize the community concerns as well as an attempt to either change directions, reduce or eliminate altogether fluoride, or continue as is. So there's many options on the table. I appreciate your suggestion.
I'd like to add one more thing if I would, and that is just talking about those intelligence studies. The studies indicate that there seems to be about a 10-point IQ drop for those people that are consuming sodium chloride in their drinking water compared to those who do not. And if we would all like to have almost a standard deviation of intelligence higher, then we would do ourselves well to eliminate the sodium chloride from our drinking water.
Okay, I think Ms. Drummond has a question, but before I let you go, would you please be able to refer any source documents that you've gleaned information from? I know you stated a lot of information, statistics. If you could get it to my email through the municipality on the website under Assembly section.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that next week. I could be busy for this week.
Very good. Ms. Drummond has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. Are you aware of any communities that put calcium fluoride in their water as opposed to sodium fluoride?
No, I'm not an expert, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for calling. All right, so we have several pieces of information from community concerns, and I want to balance this out from information education. That's why we're here. And I'll have some follow-up questions here, the health community and the health department as well as David. Missing.
Assemblyman Chair, or Assemblyman Holman. I just wanted to state for the record that those of us here are from staff, and that this was a meeting that was called by the Assembly to look into fluoridation.
That's right.
And we are here to be neutral listeners and then gather information. And that there are people here, you published the meeting,
Yes.
and anybody who is here was here because they called and asked to be here.
Yes.
Neither of our departments gathered people to come here today. So I just wanted to make sure that was on the
Sure.
record, that people contacted us and we forwarded that information to you, but we did not make a concentrated effort to go out and ask people to come to us. They heard about the meeting and wanted to come.
I appreciate that, Ms. Engel, and I know that you weren't here since the beginning of 21, I believe it was, or when we incorporated as a municipality or a city and then municipality in the 70s. But at some point, the municipality has to endorse fluoride in the water. So it's in the water, and it's a public, I guess the justification of the need for it in the water at this point, was it based on public health, interest public health? Do you recall, or do you know?
I can't speak for how what made fluoride be in Anchorage's water. I know that fluoridation is considered to be one of the greatest achievements in public health in the 20th century in preventing dental caries. But in terms of Anchorage, when they decided, I didn't live here when they decided
Sure.
to start it.
Sure.
I think that our current position is that right now it's part of municipal code, and that we fluoridate, and I think we all agree on this, we fluoridate according to the law, and that it's legislative prerogative, certainly, to look into this and hear different sides and make different proposals, and we will answer your questions and respond as best we can. We may not have the answers today.
And I will lean back to Ms. Drummond about specific data and information she may be looking for. It's not a bad idea. However, at the same time, recognizing the difficulty going back to the early days, if we could find where those documents are, anything that's stated, and any justification. Oftentimes, it's like the Constitution of the United States. The people that were there, our founding fathers, it's difficult to know what their intent was based on what you read on a printed piece of paper.
But I would just reiterate that we're here to be a resource and to get information, but
Yes.
we did not, this is something that you brought forward, and we're here to
That's correct.
support your interest in looking into the issue, but we don't, the administration doesn't have a different position other than what's currently part of municipal code, and we can't really respond to anything that we don't have a proposal.
Okay, so on the list of things that we need facts for, it may not be the job of either of these two departments, but we need a history of the municipal code, how fluoride got into the municipal code, what year that was done. We have paper going back to God knows when. The clerk's office is certainly capable of doing that, beginning that research. for us. But we need to know the historical piece of how fluoride came to be placed in our water.
And
Thank
I
you.
also understood that you were interested in trying to get a more accurate number of how many people are exposed.
That's correct.
And,
Right.
getting information from an endocrinologist at some future date.
Thank you.
Keeping those things that you are interested in, and we are certainly happy to willing to assist with you getting.
Very good, thank you.
And just so you know, from the assembly members, colleagues, Ms. Kate is actually, as long as the computer technology stays with us, she's taking notes, so we'll have some good information to go from. So I'm really interested in learning from the Centers for Disease Control Prevention and the Alaska Dental Society. Dr. Thomas, are you willing to give us, Dr. Thomas?
I no longer work for the Centers for Disease Control.
Oh, okay.
I work for Alaska Native Tribal Health Association.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that. I'll get back to you in just a minute. And Dr. Toll, Mr. Toll, is it possible to get the position of the Alaska Dental Society about fluoride?
It certainly is. Mr. Chairman, committee members, I am Jim Toll, I'm the Executive Director of the Alaska Dental Society. I am not a dentist. I'm an administrator of a professional organization. The Alaska Dental Society is a constituent of the American Dental Association, and we have 7 component societies, of which the Anchorage Dental Society is one. The position of, we will refer to it as organized dentistry, those dentists who choose to join the professional society, is one of prevention. And they view, based on the historical evidence, research, and scientific evidence that's available to them, that community water fluoridation is an excellent tool for the prevention of oral disease, primarily caries. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has in fact proclaimed that community water fluoridation is one of the 10 greatest public health achievements of the 20th century. They've said that, they're on record, and they have not backed down, nor have they retreated from that. As a public health measure, fluoridation is, from our perspective, best compared to fortifying salt with iodine, fortifying milk with vitamin D, fortifying orange juice with calcium. One of the primary advantages of community water fluoridation is it benefits everyone without demanding of them personal behavior changes. You get the advantages without brushing twice a day. You don't have to remember to brush before you leave the house in the morning. You don't have to remember to brush before you go to bed at night, because you're going to be consuming water, and it benefits the residents in that way. It is a benefit that is primarily in discussion talked about children. The benefits in preventing cavities are throughout life. Our population is aging, people are retaining their teeth longer, and our senior citizens, as well as our middle-aged and children, all benefit from having that preventive element in their diet. I will let the dentist here address the question, and it has been stated whether topical application is preferable to ingestion, but I have been repeatedly told by my members that they can tell the difference, and they know that through ingestion, that builds the strongest and healthiest teeth. That topical application is an excellent alternative when that is not available, and something that we promote. There have been years of research. You were becoming aware that you can't be like a panel of economists. There are a wide variety of experts representing a full spectrum, but I would argue that the bulk of the expertise and the bulk of the science, if you begin to assemble it and review it carefully, is supportive of community water fluoridation as an effective tool for the prevention of caries. There are certain recognized risks. One of those is fluorosis, which is a discoloration. Fluorosis is not a disease. I don't think the dentist here, the physicians will tell you that it is a disease. It is a matter of discoloration that goes on. What has not been addressed are the complications, and we have been told that Juneau, which was the first major city recently to do it, the members of the Alaska Dental Society practice in Juneau are telling us that they are already beginning to see the ramifications of that, that they are noticing people with weaker tooth structure. Now, we don't have science yet to back that because this is something which takes time. But the advantage of the prevention is that it is aimed, and the real people who benefit from it are those who are most disadvantaged to access care. And one of the challenges that you have, or as elected public officials, when you know about, is when you, and should you make the decision to remove that, I think every dentist and medical provider here will tell you that eventually, within the city of Anchorage, you will see an increase in caries. And that increase will be highest in the low income and those least able to afford alternatives. And it will have an economic impact. It will drive up your Medicaid expenses.
Excuse me just a minute.
Sure.
I'm going to ask, I hear a little mumbling in the back. Please, if you need to have a conversation with somebody, take it out of the room. We're here all about respect. We give you the opportunity to speak. If there's a recognized question, we'll go through the chair. Mr. Toll, you about concluded?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a number of other points which to some extent are repetitive, but again, with prevention and with aiming at those people at least, the problem is, and Dr. Kowaleski can tell you, that when you get massive decay, which is all too common and unfortunate in low-income children, you have to treat it in an OR with a number of people there. And again, the reality is that you and I as taxpayers are the ones who have to pick up the tab for that. And the cost effectiveness of the prevention of decay and the benefit to those elements of society who are at least able to afford it are the primary ones, Mr. Chairman.
And if there's documents, Mr. Toll, you probably heard me already ask other speakers if you could provide those to us.
I'm more than happy to provide it with the library. And just let me say that it's been addressed that the ADA, and I will say that the ADA, of which I represent, it wasn't in abundance of caution that it issued an interim document, guidance document regarding infant formula. They have revised that. I will get the revised version to your assistant. And it is a concern, but there are ways to deal with that, and the ADA and its constituent societies, including the Alaska Dental Society, stand firmly in favor of continued our water fluoridation. There was a national preventive dentistry demonstration that was published in the cost and effectiveness of various types and combinations of school-based preventive dental care procedures. The program involved nearly 10,000 grade school children from fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities studied over 4 years. The results showed that those school-based dental health lessons, weekly and bi-weekly brushing and flossing were not consistently effective in preventing clinical significant amounts of tooth decay beyond the already preventive types at home and dental care office. The same study concluded that fluoridation was the most cost-effective means to reduce decay. And as elected public officials, I would remind you, it is the most cost-effective way that we have.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Toll. Thank you, Mr. Toll. You said that the ADA provides a document regarding infant formula. Can you describe, without providing the document, can you briefly describe how they propose to handle fluoridation and infant formula?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that off the top of my head. I can get that to you.
Yeah, I would
just haven't
appreciate that, because
read it
that has
in
been suggested as a beginning point to me as an elected official, is to insert a warning in the AWW water bills to parents of infants who mix formula with fluoridated water, with their domestic water. And I think it would be crucial to this organization to know how DADA proposes to handle that concern, which is a big concern because infants have no control over what goes in their body. They can't go out and shop for non-fluoridated water. They are totally dependent on their parents to control the amount of fluoride that enters their very small systems, which is quite a different sized person than an adult. So I would appreciate, and you don't have any sort of summary in mind. I mean, it seems to me that you should. Or anyone else, any other dentist in this room aware of what the ADA proposes? Ma'am?
Dr. Mary Willard from the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and I'm a dentist. And I brought along a paper that has a quote, not from the ADA, but from Dr. Howard Koh, who was the Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary for Health in 2011. And he summarized the infant formula question this way. Parents and caregivers can use fluoridated water for preparing infant formula. He said they can use it. However, if the child is excessively consuming infant formula reconstituted with fluoridated water, there is an increased potential for mild dental fluorosis. The majority of fluoride comes from the water used to mix the formula in that instance. Some parents may choose to use low fluoride bottled water some of the time to mix infant formula. So he doesn't even say they have to use non-fluoridated water, but low fluoride would be acceptable.
Thank you.
And just so you know, we've heard about 40 minutes or better of information from members who are concerned about fluoride in the water. So in the interest of time on the meeting, I'd like to hear from some of more of the subject matter expert.
Chairman, I have a question.
No, not at this point, sir. I'm going to move on. If we have time towards the end of it, I'll have follow-up questions allowed. Sir, are you with the industry? That's right, you're with the...
I'll ask Native Tribal Health.
Yes, please.
I could add some comments if you like.
Your name again, sir? Sorry.
My name is Troy Ritter. I work as Applied Sciences Manager for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. I've been working with water systems and water and health issues in Alaska since 1999. I think one thing I'd like to add, kind of building on Dr. Willard's comments, is the basic principle of the field of toxicology is that all things are either safe or poison depending on how much you have. So the idea that fluoride is a poison, that could be true. So are carrot sticks or plain water or anything else you can put in your body. So the issue itself isn't so much poison or not poison, but how much fluoride are you putting in your body? Sure, a child is smaller than a person, an adult person, but they probably drink less water. So if you're going to drink a lot of that, then that could be a problem with anything. I know in my work I had someone that called me a while ago and said, hey, my son drank like 12 of those Red Bulls, can he die or not? And we had to look it up, and there's a formula. You can die from Red Bull, but you got to drink a bunch of it. Fluoride, like anything else, is either safe or a poison, no matter how much you have. Now, I wanted to just talk for a minute, maybe to follow up on a few things I've heard here today. The topic of medicine has come up. Medicine is something that affects health. Kind of the same thing. Pretty much everything affects health. One of the things I wanted to follow up on also was with the calling. I also have that same degree that you talked about, the degree in environmental health science. I went on to get a master's degree in public health, and I'm a fifth-year PhD student studying water and health in Alaska. I don't know of any mainstream public health or healthcare organization that opposes water fluoridation. Some individuals within those organizations do. So yeah, we have that degree. what's important to note is that the National Environmental Health Association, the association that sort of governs our profession, strongly supports water fluoridation. I'm also a past president of the Alaska Environmental Health Association. We support water fluoridation. I'm not here to speak for the Alaska Environmental Health Association, but I can tell you that's the case. I think I came here to talk about fluoride. Maybe what I could provide that's a little more beneficial is just some thoughts on maybe the human brain and how we think about fear and topics, and give some information about
You
this.
able to do that pretty succinctly, Don?
I can do it very, very fast. You know, I heard things here today, people talking about their health conditions and certain problems, and statements such as, I can't prove this, but I suspect fluoride is the cause of this, and I don't know how harmful fluoride was to my condition. When people have a problem, it's natural to look for the cause. When we have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Our brains are programmed, wired to think fear first, and logic and reason second. So when you hear these comments, things like neurotoxin, hypertension, or apoptosis, there's a long list. It's natural for us to be concerned about these. I think what I would caution the Assembly and everyone involved in is to think through these issues, to rely on the experts that we have put into positions of authority on public health topics in Anchorage, and really let the logic and reasoning come forward and let the fear dissipate under it. This is a topic of such high emotion, and I've seen this over and over. I've been to so many different community meetings like this and seen the same thing. It's very difficult when you're trying to deal with this on a community-wide issue, because fear spreads very quickly, logic and reasoning spreads very slowly. So this is a difficult issue to handle in a public election, because just the enormity and the complexity and just the way our brains are wired. But I'd love to talk on this all day. It's really fun. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but I'll just leave it at that.
Mr. Drummond does have a question.
Thank you. I appreciate that you're here, Mr. Ritter, and also the others from the Alaska Tribal Health Consortium. I'm just curious who your patients are at the Alaska Tribal Health, because we're talking about Anchorage's water, and I know a lot of you folks have a statewide perspective. I'm really interested in the kind of data that you've collected on the communities that you work with around the state, as well as Anchorage, and your data on communities that are fluoridated and communities that are not fluoridated, and how it relates to your patients.
Sure. Well, let me explain. The Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium serves American Indian and Alaska Native people who live in Alaska. About half of those people live in Anchorage. So we certainly have an interest in this topic in Anchorage, even though we might be perceived as being an organization that serves rural villages. But yeah, Dr. Thomas, for example, has published some work, are working on some studies. There's been a lot of studies that have been done throughout the U.S. and a couple here in Alaska where we've looked at the topic of water fluoridation and how our dental caries. I would be surprised if the Assembly doesn't already have those scientists.
A little further on that thought. It's my understanding that it's about 100 to 120,000 Alaska Natives in the state of Alaska, and just 20,000 live in Anchorage. Again, it's a point of data I would really like to have. Before we throw out statistics, there's a lot of talk about chemistry and science and statistics and environmental, percentages and parts per billion and parts per million. I really would appreciate that we have accurate numbers, because Anchorage is known to be the largest village in Alaska of Alaska Native. My husband is part American Indian. I've got a fair amount of knowledge of what has happened in rural communities, but we're here to talk about Anchorage. So I would appreciate if you could pull your experience in rural communities and relate it to what you're finding in Anchorage. And I'm really interested in rural communities that aren't fluoridated and what the dental community that serves those communities finds. As a former school board member, I can't tell you when this happened. It's got to be at least around 2000. The dental community, I don't recall if it was state or local, held a very large forum at the BP Energy Center. We were shown about 2 hours worth of slides of infants teeth erupted from their gums rotten because their parents put them to sleep with not water in their bottles, but soda. We saw photographs of Super Cubs filled with soda, sugared soda, being transported to Bush, Alaska, not water. There were some serious health issues that all of you know result from the inability of rural communities to get clean water, and the inability to control the amount of sugared sodas that they drink. And things have changed in 10 or 12 years, I'm sure. But fluoride is not the only reason that these communities have serious dental care issues. We all know that. And our school district has done its best to get sugared sodas out of the schools and out of vending machines and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of other issues besides fluoride that affect caries, and I'd like everybody to stay on top of that.
Well, thank you. I'd like to follow up with Native Health Consortium, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. Been some commentary, and I know. Thank you, sir, for your with your subject matter area. And maybe it is you, Dr. Thomas, since you identified you're now with. Is there someone from the Alaska Native Health Tribal Consortium that has a position, official position on fluoride in the drinking water in Anchorage? Is there something someone would like to be able to state on behalf of? Someone authorized it?
Well, let me say, I'm not here to give the organization's position, but I can tell you that I've worked at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium since 2003, and we have programs that specifically work to promote water fluoridation in villages, and then keep people to ensure that it's used properly. So we've been supporting water fluoridation for a long time, and we'll continue to.
Is that position to continue fluoridation? I mean, I'm asking for suggestions, some solutions or suggestions. Reduce, eliminate, continue in its form?
I'm the Alaska Area Dental Officer and also the dental consultant for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. We support the fluoridation of water, community water supplies.
At the existing level, higher, lower?
Yes, and we'll listen to the CDC's recommendations as well for decreasing the levels when those are finalized. I would like to correct the statements that have been made so far, that the CDC's recommendations are not finalized at this point. They are still researching the information about lowering the rate to 0.7. And that, as we heard already, the reason for lowering that is because we are using good science. We are very conscientious healthcare providers in public health at the CDC, and when you have something that works well, you want to use it at the correct amount. And if 0.7 works just as well as 1.2, then there is no need to fluoridate any higher than that. So let's not do it. And that's a very appropriate position to take. And it's not because they believe that it's harmful to have that fluoride in the water. They just believe that the most benefit with the least amount of side effects or undesirable effects would be the 0.7. And those side effects that they cite are mild dental fluorosis. I've worked on the Navajo reservation where they have communities that are fluoridated, that drink fluoridated water that is naturally fluoridated above the levels that are recommended. And we did have quite a bit of fluorosis in the teeth in those communities. And me working out in those communities with my real bright lights and all of my instruments so that I can check the teeth as closely as possible, it was very difficult to be able to determine whether the tooth actually had mild fluorosis or not. It's not until you get into the high or severe fluorosis range when the normal eye can actually see what's happening. There is no problem with mild fluorosis as far as being a detriment to being able to function well with your teeth. You can chew, the teeth do not fall apart, they're actually stronger and resist decay better.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is it my understanding that the AWW has already reduced the amount of fluoride?
Yes.
And was it based on the same kind of good science that Dr. Ritter is talking about? Excuse me, Dr. Willett.
It based on the recommendations that we received from the, I believe it's U.S. Department of Health.
And what's, it's just not final. She's saying that's the preliminary findings, but it's not finalized. Is that correct?
Yes.
But, so your recommendations to your member communities, the communities that you serve, is not final yet, so that none of them have reduced the amount of fluoride that they put in their water?
If I can give some history to this. In 2002, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium sent letters to communities, I believe all the fluoridating water systems in Alaska, saying that this change is coming down the road, and that if they wanted, they could be proactive and go ahead and implement the new level. And as a rule, the village communities in Alaska have been operating at the new lower rate, or the new lower level since that time in general. I can provide a copy of that letter.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful.
So the change in Alaska really isn't much of a change. We've been doing it for over a decade.
I'd like to hear briefly, Ms. Culpepper, is there anything that you'd like to add on behalf of?
I feel like though, because my name is Lisa Culpepper, I'm the chair of the Alaska Dental Action Coalition, and I'm a day job with the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority. We support dental issues because our beneficiaries are usually low income and have surprisingly a number of dental problems. But I've been letting our coalition has 40 organizations, most of which are in the room, and so we have a fluoride committee that Troy is the chair of, and working on fluoridation of water systems as well as topical fluoride application in other ways across the state, and looking at education on the things. And we just wanted to make sure that everyone heard both sides, and I'm really pleased to hear that you're fact-finding and looking. I mean, if, from any public health person, I'll tell you that we want to not have adverse health effects. But when people say adverse health effects, we have to be very specific, and we have to look at what the general scientific community says. That to make sure that the studies are reputable and are from good sources, and then look at things. There, as Troy said, there's ups and downs. So we're glad that you're doing your fact-finding. Any of our professionals, other people are happy to help you find the studies or other information. We have a letter from the Dental Action Coalition just supporting a good process, because we fear that maybe some of the other communities, the process went a little too fast and was a little too emotional without looking at where those studies are coming from and balancing that with public health.
So your recommendation as an association?
As
The
a
process?
coalition, I would say all of us have resolutions within our individual organizations supporting fluoridation at levels recommended by CDC.
And
I will say I'm also a two-time past president of the Alaska Public Health Association, and we have resolutions in favor of fluoridation.
Mr. Luby from AARP, is there a position?
Yeah, I'm from Dr. Colbert's our chief medical officer
Yes.
for the state.
I'm gonna get to him.
Okay.
Believe me.
Fine, thank you.
I didn't know if you had a succinct statement or.
Yes, I'll be very brief. My name is Pat Luby, L-U-B-Y. I'm the advocacy director for AARP in Alaska. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in World War I and World War II, most of the people who were declined from the draft for oral health purposes because they could not find 6 opposing teeth, upper and lower. And we've come a long way since then. Grandparents today can look at their grandchildren and know that primarily because of good dental care, but also because of good fluoridation, that the teeth of their grandchildren are much healthier, particularly in some of those communities that we already have fluoridation in. Only about half the United States is fluoridated. AARP's position is that we ought to be 100% fluoridated in all our public water systems. And we would encourage Anchorage to continue with what they're doing. There is really no medical organizations, no dental organizations, no health organizations that have come out against fluoridation. People are, good science is being done by the CDC in particular, with those recommendations on what level it ought to be at. There's been a lot of experiments with fluorides trying to do them as sealants with children, and that's been somewhat successful. All of us drink water. Not all of us are going to have kids that have sealants. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that all our kids, all our adults have access to fluoride in the public water systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Herbert, if it's possible, sir, I know you're the Chief Medical Officer and Director of the Alaska Division of Public Health, correct?
Yes, sir.
And is there anything that you'd like to be able to share with us on behalf of the, I mean, I know this is a statewide issue that you're overseeing. Is there something that we should know about from the state's level recommendation or knowledge of some of the information that's been received today?
Yes. Again, Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is Ward Herbert. I am the Director of the Division of Public Health, Chief Medical Officer of the state of Alaska. I first came to Alaska in 1961. Spent the first couple of years in Dillingham, and Alaska has been our home most of the time since then. We've spent some time outside, but the rest of the time Anchorage has always been our home. In the 60s, I don't have the documentation that I'm sure the department has here, but clearly the discussion adding the fluoride in water was related to dental caries, and that was the reason it was done. The use of fluoride was kind of a natural experiment where it was noted that in places where there was high fluoride in the water, there were problems with the fluorosis, with the whitening and then blackening of the teeth. But it was discovered that it did reduce dental cavities. And so then it was found that at a low level, at the level of the 0.7 to 1.2, 1.3 parts per million, you had some whitening in about 30% of the kids, but otherwise a reduction. And initially, nationally, the reduction was about 50 to 60% in dental cavities. With the addition of fluoride to toothpaste, with the use by dentists of fluoride treatments, that reduction now is more in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% because there is fluoride coming in other ways. But it was a natural experiment there, and that has been demonstrated through observational studies nationally. As has been mentioned, CDC at the end of the last century for Y2K said, what are the major public health achievements of the last century? And they named 10 items like vaccination, where in my early days of my training, we saw kids in iron lungs for polio. And then Dr. Salk came along, and we were able to prevent that. The motor vehicle safety, where we had seatbelt covered, and the mandatory use of seatbelts and so on. One of the 10 was the fluoridation of water that was recognized as a seminal public health achievement of the last century that we have. There are more recent studies. For example, the state of New York looked at Medicaid recipients, where they have several million recipients in the state of New York, and they found that in counties, and as the Assemblyperson Drummond has pointed out, there are people in Anchorage that don't have water. We live on the hillside, and we have our own well, but at the Frontier Building, I drink fluoridated water every day. So what they had to do in New York, they took counties where predominantly the people were exposed to fluoridated water systems and others where they were not, and found a 33% reduction in the use of dental procedures and loss of teeth in kids where they were exposed to the fluoride. Closer to home, just last year, CDC, working with the Arctic Investigations Lab here, published a study comparing Alaska Native villages where the water system was fluoridated and some where they still are not. There's still some where they're not fluoridated, and they found a 25% reduction in fluoride there here in Alaska. Looking at that, and there are older studies that have looked at that. We do other interventions. It was mentioned that we require iodine and salt. That's to prevent goiter. We require enriched rice or enriched wheat and bread. That's to prevent the niacin deficiencies that we get, the pellagra, the other diseases that you get from that. We do have the chlorine in the water. Public health started with the Broad Street pump, Dr. Jonathan Snow, who found the cholera epidemic and took the handle off, dismantled the pump. But that led to adding a substance to the water to keep people from getting cholera and typhoid and other diseases that you can get from that. We do have a dental section within the Division of Public share the information. We believe that the fluoridation of water is important to our citizens, that it is of an important public health benefit. I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Any questions before I do? All right. Real quick question I might have, and I don't know, perhaps you may know, I understand that perhaps Mr. Cheney shared with me that Palmer, city of Palmer, who stopped fluoridation of the, I may be getting this wrong, is it the sodium fluoride that's the bad kind, the calcium fluoride's the good, okay. That has determined that Matsu, or at least in Palmer, their water source has a naturally occurring calcium fluoride, is that true?
It would depend on the location, but areas where you have sufficient naturally occurring fluoride provide that protection. I am not aware of evidence that I'm aware of that I find credible that sodium fluoride is a poison or is bad for you, or that the calcium fluoride is worse. I think the question that's been raised today is reasonable, and that would be information that you would want to know.
Yes.
But it is important to know how much fluoride's in the water. If you add more, it does cause fluorosis. So if you have a naturally occurring level of 1 or 2 parts per million, and then you add another 1 part per million, you're going to have more fluorosis. It doesn't shorten your life. It doesn't do anything. It may make your teeth look white. It was described where it can be hard to see, or if it gets high enough, it can actually get black. You don't have cavities as much, but it is a cosmetic defect.
Does the, let's see, I'm sorry, you're the director of the State Division of Public Health?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, that would help. Do you take a position on communities removing fluoride from their water, such as Palmer, such as Fairbanks? Or does the state not govern those types of decisions?
The state does not take a formal position in that the state does not believe its role is to intrude into local affairs. That's a part of our overall philosophy here in Alaska. So neither the state legislature nor the governor has taken a formal position. We do have our general public health section, and we have worked with Fairbanks, we have worked with Palmer, we worked with Juneau. Basically, from our standpoint, we failed when the decision was made to remove fluoride. So as a public health division, we do believe that fluoride is important, but the state does not, in the sense that you asked the question, have a formal position as a part of our philosophy that Anchorage should govern itself, Palmer should govern itself, and our other communities should.
Thank you.
Mr. Trainian.
It's a question, the areas of the state that they've gotten rid of fluoride, is it based on economics because they don't have to spend the money on it, or is it based on sound science from your point of view?
From my understanding, where the fluoride has been removed has consistently been because of concern that it may present a danger to the citizens. It has not been driven by the economics of the issue.
And reflection. Mr. Princiotta?
Just a brief question for you. Do you know whether or not the substance that's being put into our water has been specifically produced for the application of putting it in our water, or if the substance that's being put in our water happens to be a byproduct of some other chemical process and thereby has actually no value anywhere else except to stick it in our water at our expense? Is it produced for us to be put in our water? Is it produced to medical standards?
When I have been responsible for programs where it was purchased, the sodium fluoride that was purchased was produced for that purpose. It was marketed for that purpose. It was a business. To specifically answer your question, I don't have that.
It was not a byproduct of another process. It was originally, specifically, is that your?
Mr. Princiotta, that's my understanding. I want to make sure we've got a limited time for the room and availability for the meeting that's been called. So I want to continue to speed this along. I appreciate the dialogue. We'll have
Trying to
get off
develop
track.
a fact.
Okay, I
appreciate it.
understand. What we're going to do is my understanding, just so you know, and maybe perhaps AWU folks can, different vendors for the fluoride that you purchased to put into the product. Is that right? Have you used different vendors throughout the history of time?
We go out to bid typically every 3 years for a contract.
So my understanding, Mr. Princiotta, is, to get your question, is there have been products developed by different vendors to, for the use of this treatment.
I'm sorry, so that was not the answer. That was not the answer that man gave.
I'd like to state that there is a quality and safety of fluoride additives. It's a standard 60, and it's a program commissioned by the Environmental Protection Agency. And that program is required to ensure that all the fluoride that's used in community water fluoridation meets the minimum standards of quality and safety.
Is that what you were gonna say, Doc?
Again, it's not responsive.
Doc, is that what you were gonna say? Was that what you were gonna add to, sir?
Well, you know, I think I would agree with that. Maybe I could also add on this, maybe address the idea of fluoride as a byproduct or as a waste product. You know, it's really simple, and it sort of goes along with this idea that fluoride is poison or not poison or medication or not medication. It's a lot of discussion about nothing really. You know, sometimes when you dig in the ground, maybe you're looking for something like tin, you can dig up other things. Could be fluoride, could be a diamond, but it doesn't make that other product that you dig up any less valuable or worthless or harmful in any other way. It's just a terminology. So I think it's important to point that out.
Yes, Ms. Drummond?
I think a question I have is, all the communities that fluoridate their water in the United States, do they all use sodium fluoride? Do some use calcium fluoride? Is there a different type of chemical composition of fluoride that is used? I think that's part of the fact finding we need to do. In my opinion, does anybody else in
That's what I
Alaska
was
use
getting
anything
to.
besides sodium fluoride?
That was probably the question we
I
had.
can answer this really easily. In Alaska, we use sodium fluoride in our small systems. In almost everywhere else in the U.S., use fluorosilicic acid. Well, silly acid is the common name for it. Here in Alaska, transporting that silly acid is too dangerous. It's very, very acidic. It's difficult to fly it around.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's, to me, that's scary, right
it's
there.
an acid.
I think we need some unbiased information, not using terms like dangerous to transport, because that tells me right away, why are we putting it in our water if it's dangerous to transport?
But chlorine is
There's no
can be
acid
dangerous.
fluoride in Alaska.
Well, I think haven't people died from the ingestion of too much fluoride in Alaska? And there's a few communities that over-fluoridated. There are I think one of our military bases over-fluoridated
before the end of this.
sometime in the last couple of years, and they were told not to drink their water for as many days as it took to get it out of the system. There are over-fluoridation issues due to the danger of the stuff we're putting in our water that we also need to be aware of, and historically.
And that's the questions that we're trying to get to here before the end of the testimony here. Mr. Egger, if you just bear with me. The next question, and I had of you, Doctor, is, and perhaps AWU can help identify as well, and perhaps with Mr. Ritter, if you've been doing the study with environmental health and the water systems. My understanding is we have had instances, as Ms. Drummond said, of overfluoridation where it's caused a concern for public health. Are you aware of what those issues were? I understand anecdotally through AWU, the short conversation I had was, I understand how it got to that point, or they believe, but they don't know because they weren't part of the investigatory link. Did the public health department of the state investigate or identify causations and or the health concerns and what ramification consequences of them?
There are two situations in Alaska that I'm aware of where there was over-fluoridation of water. The first, which is noted nationally because it was so tragic, was at Hooper Bay. And I was not with the state of Alaska at the time, but there was untrained or inadequately trained water plant operator in Hooper Bay. This was about, 20, 25 years ago?
20 years ago.
I think it was 1993. It's the New England Journal. I have, and I can provide you a New England Journal of Medicine article that well documents the Hooper Bay incident, as well as the internal.
Briefly, Mr. Avery,
On the Hooper Bay incident, it was exactly 20 years ago, and we marked the 20th anniversary with our protest in front of the City Hall.
And that
If we could let Dr.
Yes.
Hurlbert finish, please.
That led to loss of life because of the fluoride. Now, if you take too much aspirin, you could die. If you take too much Tylenol, you could die. So there are other substances, many other things that we a pretty great benefit when it's used appropriately, but if you use too much, it could kill you. The other one was something that you just mentioned, was the more recent episode at J-Bear, where there was an overfeed of fluoride into the water system. And that was picked up very quickly, within just 2 or 3 hours. And because of the risks of getting too much, the levels did not nearly get to what they got to in Hooper Bay, because that went on a period of days before it was realized what happened. The water system was shut down. They did flush it. They did get out to the end users and asked them not to use that. There was not the risk of that level of fluoride of what happened, what we saw in Hooper Bay. But what happened was an accident. It was something that did occur, and it was dealt with, but there was the potential risk there.
Just a comment, you said you can take too much aspirin, you can take too much Tylenol. All those things come in bottles with labels and warnings, and now they come with entire booklets on the bottles. If you peel them back, you find out all kinds of horrible things that happen. The fluoride in our water doesn't come with a label. The fluoride in our toothpaste comes with labels that says if children ingest more than a pea-sized whatever it is, take them to the poison control center. There are labels, and then there are nothing. And right now, there's nothing that tells our citizens what they're getting in their water and what dosage is. I mean, you can eat too many carrots. I thought that was an interesting, but at some point your stomach will refuse to accept more carrots. You can drink too much water. At some point, you will drown.
The labeling, I would suggest, comes at the point of the water plant operator. That whether it's the chloride that we put in the water, the chlorine, or whether it's the fluoride, the labeling would be there, that's a potentially hazardous substance. Clearly it is. That there are other things that go into our food, that go into our everyday lives, and the labeling would be there for those operators who use that.
I'm sorry I didn't, that's fine for the operators at the AWU plant who put the stuff in the water. We get an annual report in our bills from AWU that describes what's in our water, the levels of chemicals, arsenic, so on and so forth.
You know, right.
I do. I pay WWU for sewer services. We get the same document that everybody else gets who drinks the AWW.
Just make it, you have well water.
It doesn't contain any warnings about fluoride, and in fact, I'm gonna make it a point to look at those, because I collect those things, because my little water system also produces such a document that tells us what the condition of our water is too, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir, quick question.
David Verner with Occupy from the North. I have a quick question. Since we are now moving towards a nationalized social health care system, and Alaska is actually, we got various kinds of social health care, whether it's with native corporations or I can't remember what's the name of the child care kind of thing. Couldn't we switch off of water fluoridation and go for a more targeted, direct action of identifying those that have tooth decay issues and giving them fluoridated toothpaste or fluoride bottles as part of the whole healthcare system that we're now going to start instituting in the next 2 years and so far down the line? Could we sort of change the way that we do the process?
So I'm guessing this is a question that might be a suggestion of a
Yes.
solution. I did. So I'm gonna note that, sir, and I appreciate your comment. Anything, Mr. King? You had a
Just the
question?
doctor was correct. I was out there at J-Bear when that incident happened. It's because of the machinery and the contractor was running the fluoride system, putting it into the water system. And they notified everybody on base immediately. There were no health problems. Just a couple days you couldn't use the water. It worked out fine.
Did you follow up with monitoring people that might have health?
We're not taking questions from the audience, man.
All right, we're coming to the end of our time period allotted, and I do realize and know that we started a little later. I will tell you that as Chair of the Public Safety Committee, to my colleagues, that I don't believe we're done with this matter in particular, and as the reason I state that is the investment given by concerned members of the community. I'm very thankful that you, Mr. Agri, I'm going to just recognize you momentarily, your repeated appearances before the Assembly to bring this topic up. Ms. Drummond and Ms. Elder Jackson, I know, have asked me on repeated, Ms. Drummond in particular, can we schedule this with Public Safety Committee? And I'm sorry that it has taken so long to get here. We, of course, have many other matters that we address. Ms. Single, thank you for your patience as well. I know that this is something that we've had discussions on. And of course, with the utility, I appreciate your appearance. I understand it was a board meeting today, otherwise you might have had a few other folks in attendance, but very capably represented today, and I appreciate it. Sir, I appreciate your comments, and I want to just address briefly one of the concerns raised. One of the reasons that we have midday meetings is, believe me, and it drives the clerk's office nuts. I have had meetings different times of the day, different weeks of the month, at different locations. It drives them nuts. They want consistency. They want, so the public knows when, second Wednesday, noon, at the, wherever, and stick to it. It's something that drives people. Excuse me?
I was, when I left the Assembly, I was under the impression it was the 13th until 2 days ago.
I understand, and that was my error, and I apologize for that. And I will tell you that I've addressed many meetings, and I'm willing to meet anytime, anywhere. And I have found that, look at here, at noon today, we've got a pretty good sized number of turnout on one issue. We normally have 2 or 3 matters that draws significantly smaller crowds. So I will tell you that I think the public is fairly well represented here, and I appreciate your passion to it. Mr. Trainee had a comment.
Another problem, your comment earlier, a lot of times we have a hearing on something Tuesday night, and people complain, why'd you have the meeting at night? I can get off in the daytime. So what we get is we get both sides of any question we have. I've done this for about 14 years. And I've heard from people that we want to meet in the daytime. I've heard from people we don't want to meet at night. There's no way you can make everybody happy, sir.
So we do the best to accommodate, and believe me, we'll have a further conversation on the matter here.
Through the chair.
And sir, you had one comment, I
just
said.
wanted to.
Yes.
Can I give this to the secretary?
Yes, you please,
Just add
please.
to the, about, it's a chart about tooth decay trends for fluorinated versus unfluorinated countries.
Okay,
That's all it is.
very good, appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
I have a recorded message from Dr. Walsh. He's a dentist here in town.
How long is the message?
45 seconds.
Go ahead, please. Bring it up here, please. I will assure you that we'll be ending the meeting shortly, and if there's any sidebar conversations, you can contact any one of the Assembly members. You don't have to go through this committee to do it, but I will be issuing a report of our meeting for today and schedule likely a follow-up conversation. Sir, before we go, sir?
So, I put my name on the list.
Oh.
It's not full.
I'm sorry, you Dr. Thomas?
Yeah, I am Dr. Thomas.
Okay, I've gone to you a couple times, I'm sorry, man.
Well, okay, I just said I was not speaking on behalf of CDC or
Yes.
Alaska Native. I work for the Alaska Native Tribal Conference. I just wanted to get it on record.
Yes, please.
I'm a doctor. I've lived here in Anchorage for a number of years. I've also worked out in rural Alaska, and I support the continued optimal fluoridation of the Anchorage water supply. It sounds like there's a lot of concerns about the toxicity of fluoride, and I hope you understand that fluoride is diluted before it gets put in the water. It may come in a concentrated form that is labeled,
Corrosive, toxin.
and so these are the issues that Mr. Ritter has raised, and when he says that a version of it is too acidic and therefore dangerous, it ultimately gets diluted so that it's safe to put in the water. I want to reiterate that we should not overlook the fact that in many parts of the world, including the US, fluoride occurs naturally in the water. And as Dr. Hilbert has stated, that it was noted that in areas where people had water naturally in the fluoride, their teeth were much more resistant to decay. I would challenge those that state that 1/3 of the children in areas with fluoridated water have stained teeth and fluorosis. I would actually like to see those children prevented here, because I would venture to say that, as Dr. Willard has said, it's very hard to detect that. And so these are sort of outlandish claims that say that 30% of children in fluoridated areas have fluorosis. I would also challenge those who study indicated even controlling for soda, villages without fluoridation had much worse tooth decay than villages with fluoridation. My second point has to do with, and I'll be brief, sorry, but I just didn't get a chance to has to do with science. And so there's, as ever, many people have mentioned that there's been well-conducted studies over the last 60 years consistently indicating that fluoridation from community water is safe and effective in preventing dental decay. And it is the most efficient way to prevent one of the most common childhood diseases, that being tooth decay. Those that oppose fluoridation may be hard-pressed to come up with well-conducted, peer-reviewed scientific studies that show that there is a detrimental effect to putting fluoride in the water. I would say that information that comes from the internet, emails, newsletters, and anecdotes do not qualify as valid references. Anyone could say on the internet, and those opposed to fluoridation have done so, they've charged that water fluoridation causes, you've heard some of the number of diseases that have been mentioned. Others include AIDS. I've done a lot of HIV work. It was not caused by fluoridation of the water. Alzheimer's, cancers, lead poisoning. The list goes on and on of things that have been attributed to fluoridation. And none of it can be substantiated in the scientific literature.
None of it.
My final comment, I just urge the panel to look at the science and not be swayed by vocal and threatening statements. I would urge the panel, there are various documents. The ADA has put this document out. It's a very useful, very readable document called Fluoridation Facts, put out by the ADA. Hopefully we could get a copy of this to all members of the panel at the assembly if they could read. And if the ADA is advocating fluoride, it seems to me that they are not, they don't necessarily stand to gain by advocating for fluoride, as the doctor here stated. He's in the business of making money out of decayed teeth, but he's here promoting the use of fluoride. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's hear this statement.
This is Dr. Walsh. I don't know his first name, but he is a dentist at Health Center Dentistry.
In Anchorage?
In Anchorage, yes. His office specializes in dental care and with the understanding of how it affects the entire body.
Okay.
This is Dr. Walsh calling. I didn't get back to you until late. You can feel free to quote me as being opposed to water fluoridation for a number of reasons. Freedom of choice would be one, informed consent, and that it never has been proven on a long-term basis in all the longitudinal studies that I've read that it has a beneficial effect, plus all of the health problems that are associated with it. So you can feel free to use my name and make those comments. Thank you very much.
Good. So I want to point out, sir, you had a comment?
1 minute.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Tom Kowaleski. I'm a village dentist for the last 30 years around Lake Iliamna. I'm also the dental director for the largest village in Alaska, Anchorage. We have 2 full-time operating rooms that just do kids less than 5 years old. We have 200 kids on the waiting list to get into those operating rooms due to the devastation of dental decay. On average, 40 to 50 patients present to our dental emergency room per day, and it's all related to dental decay. If you decide to remove fluoride from the water, that will definitely increase our load, and as you can see, our load is tremendous right now.
So your position is?
Fluoridate.
Okay, so we're just beyond the time scheduled, again recognizing we started just a tad late. So I will close with this. Recognizing and balancing as a legislative body, not speaking for my colleagues, again, you can address to any assembly person, your representative, or any and all of us on the internet, and I'm not sure the actual address, it's like !MAS, gets to all assembly persons if you want to do it in one shot. If you want to talk to your representative, that's fine. We would love to have information about this issue, or of course, if it's unrelated to this issue, make sure that's indicated on the reference line. Anything concerning the legislative body of the municipality of Anchorage, of course, that's our responsibility. And I recognize, again, the subject matter experts are here. I mean, I appreciate documents. I see the book that you had referenced with the ADA, Dr. Thomas. I see a book in the front here, if you want to hold it up, that says something about a case of fluoride or something like that, the case about fluoride. So there's going to be documentation on both sides of the matter, and I appreciate and fully appreciate scientific, peer-driven, substantiated, documented, verified, and vetted, rather than just, I mean, I can write a lot about my own personal life experiences, and one of the things that I'm dying to know is, as you get older, do teeth actually become more hardened and less prone to tooth decay, like cavities? Then there's the doctor over here who said his aunt, who had no cavities at all, lost all her teeth to periodontal disease. I mean, over brushing, hard bristles versus soft bristles, and I mean, there's a gentleman, Mr. Dudley, who comes and talks about the oscillating little machines that are really damaging to the tissues in your gums. And apparently he has sensitive gums as a result of it. So there's a lot of things, and I recognize the public health director from the state, Dr. Herbert, identified aspirin, Tylenol, other substances that are out there that if you take. And all of that, sir, I understand, and Mr. Drummond's correct. Those come with labels, and you put that in individually. We're talking the public's concern about the government, its government, placing a substance into its drinking water. And it's of concern enough that it is a topic that needs to be publicly discussed, thoroughly investigated, fact-found as best we can to make informed decisions as policymakers. And I want to just throw it right back onto the public. If your legislative body isn't doing it for you, if you don't believe that it's a decision we should make, that there's also ballot initiatives that can be placed on our ballot as a process, I encourage you to look into it. I would ask, and I think it was stated it more than once, I would ask that you be very cautious that we take this. You know, government's a slow-moving animal. Yeah, we can institute a law on any given Tuesday night, but typically there's unintended consequences if we go too fast and we miss a few things. And I know Mr. Trainor can speak with years of experience. We've got to go back and amend it. So consider our laws like a big piece of silly putty. It just keeps getting shaped and reshaped. And that's the approach I take. So I appreciate the deliberate discussion. I appreciate the respectfulness of and the dialogue from within the community. And it's concerned citizens and subject matter experts, as well as the subject matter experts within the medical profession, as well as the agencies and organizations. So with that, I say stand by. We've not heard the last of this, I am sure. But I want to make sure we had a thorough and vetting, thorough process. 2 hours. This is probably as long as we've ever had on any one subject, Mr. Ingers. So I want you to know that we've had this. Ms. Engel, thank you again to the Health Department. AWU, I appreciate it. Please, if you have any documentation, if you would get to us through this process. Ms. Kate is at the front. Make sure we have your email. We can send it out as a reminder. I know that some of you are involved in other products. We'll get to you in the next week or so. It's not a problem. Please get it to us as soon as you can. And with that, it is now 2:10, and we're off record, end of the committee.